Hey there, Fuel fans. Tom Callahan here with you. Thank you so much for joining me here as we've got a great chance to sit down and chat with Jim Hallett, chairman of the Fuel Hockey Club. Jim, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Well, looking forward to talking here a little bit because this is year two now for you guys. You're getting into it. You've got the first season behind you. We're halfway through the second part of the second year, so I want to get your thoughts. From year one to year two so far, what is the biggest difference that you've seen?
Well, you know, in many cases, there's been a lot of similarities. But I would say for the most part, I think that we get off to a much better start this year than we did last year. But then we went into that dry spell. You know, we had that situation where we were going on the road for 7 games, 10 days, and we had 3 call-ups, and we had 3 injuries, and they all kind of came at the same time. And we know that that's part of the deal. We know these things are going to happen throughout the course of the season, but in our case, they all happened right at that same time, right at a critical time when we were going on the road, and it really set us back. We went into a bit of a tailspin there, and I think we've come out of that now, and coaches made some adjustments. We made some player moves, and I think we're back on the winning ways, and hopefully we can keep this thing going and earn ourselves a playoff spot.
Well, and you mentioned, I mean, similarities last year to this year, just the tear this team went on the second half of the season. That's got to be encouraging for you looking forward to know that it was there last season, and it seems like they're building to that again now.
It is, and I think it is encouraging knowing that, you know, as long as you go and play one game at a time, not look at who the opponents are and not look at the calendar or where the schedule is going, but just play them one game at a time, I think it's interesting how we can get this thing turned around.
When you look at being in charge of the team and as we mentioned, being the chairman of this hockey club, what are some of the duties that you have to execute as a chairman for this Fuel team?
You know, for the most part, Tom, my son Sean, as you know, runs the day-to-day operations as CEO and Chief Operating Officer of the Fuel. My responsibility is primarily with Coach Hillman. I talk with Coach Hillman on hockey decisions, on personnel, on players that are coming, players that are possibly going to be traded. Other than that, really, on a day-to-day basis, I don't have a lot of involvement. I tell people I'm really just a fan.
Well, and that certainly helps too. It helps to be a big fan of hockey. And so Jim Hallett, our chairman, joining us right now. So Jim, you are a fan of hockey. I know your background, you've been around the sport, you love the sport. What I want to ask you about now is the Fuel and what the Fuel are doing to promote that sport to other little kids and adults in the Indianapolis area. Let's start with the Fuel Tank at Fishers.
Fuel Tank at Fishers has been a great acquisition for us. We know that there's a strong interest in youth hockey in Indianapolis and greater Indianapolis area. We know there's a lack of facilities. And the Fuel Tank for us was an opportunity to really take a facility and to renovate the facility and to try and attract more and more youth to come and play hockey. And what we've seen there is we've seen a really great transition of the facility. We've seen an increase in the number of young children coming out, the number of young children that want to play hockey, that want to learn to skate. And we know that the best way for us to build the brand at the Fuel, at the ECHL level, is to build it with these young children that are first starting to learn to skate at 3 and 4 and 5 years old. And so we've done that at the Fuel Tank. We have aspirations to continue to develop other facilities within the greater Indianapolis area, kind of one step at a time. But there's no question when you look at youth sports in general, hockey is one of the 2 youth sports that is actually growing in terms of participation.
Well, it's interesting, too. I mean, people don't often think of the hockey history here in Indianapolis. Do you find that sometimes you get parents who come in and say, oh, I remember this team or that team, or I went to games when I was a kid, and now they see their child on the ice? Absolutely.
You know, the Coliseum has such a rich history with the folks here in Indianapolis. It was the place to be. In a lot of the formative years. You know, hockey starting here in 1939, that building was full every single night for hockey. And then we've seen a lot of different hockey teams over the course of time. We've seen a lot of other activities take place at the Coliseum. And people in Indianapolis really have an affinity with the Coliseum. And I think it's been interesting to be able to bring hockey back and to have people come and tell you the stories about how they came there with their parents or how they came there with their grandparents, and now they're bringing their children or their grandchildren. But you know, probably the most rewarding response that I get from a lot of people is it's incredible how many people just come up and say thank you for bringing professional hockey back to Indianapolis. And that in itself is very, very refreshing.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Absolutely. All right, so I want to take you back. You said a moment ago you're talking about maybe future facilities, future plans. What of those future plans would you be able to divulge right now as far as where the Fuel are looking to go in the future?
Well, I think the first thing is we know that there needs to be more facilities. And without getting into any specifics on locations and things of that nature, we know if we can build these facilities, if we can create these facilities, we know that there will be youth there to play hockey. We're going to work on developing more and more camps at the fuel tank this summer. Going to provide more learn to skate programs. Going to provide a lot of summer hockey. Hockey can become 12 months a year at the fuel tank. And I think as we get more kids into this and as we get that facility built out, then we can take a look at where do we want to put the next facility. We've kind of got a vision. We've got an idea of where we think we want to be and where we think that these facilities could best serve the greater Indianapolis area, excuse me. And with that said, we feel very, very confident that we will have a lot more youth playing hockey here in the very near term.
Well, and make no mistake, I mean, I know you say near term, but this is a long-term commitment.
There's no question. You know, our commitment at the Coliseum is a 25-year commitment. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we said going into this, there were a number of things that were important to me. Number one, I wanted to be able to bring the best level of professional hockey I could to Indianapolis. I wanted to be able to develop youth hockey and grow the sport of hockey in Indianapolis. Secondly, I wanted to be able to involve my family in running the business, in which I have Sean with the Fuel and my son Chad at the fuel tank. And then I really wanted to create a legacy in the community that could outlive me, and hopefully that will happen, and that's the commitment that we've made.
Well, Jim, great stuff. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom.
All right, that is Fuel Chairman Jim Hallett joining us here, and we appreciate you joining us here as well, Fuel fans.